Sometimes the difference between a decorated career and a prison cell is a single arrogant mistake. This is the story of a police officer who thought he'd caught a car thief, but in reality, he was ending his own career. He pointed his finger at a woman he saw as just another statistic, but he had no idea she was the one who would eventually be signing his prison sentence. The afternoon sun of late July cast a warm glow over Clearwater Park, where federal judge Danielle Brooks enjoyed a rare moment of peace. Dressed in a simple linen sundress, she laughed with her 9-year-old niece, Maya, who was passionately arguing for mint chocolate chip ice cream over vanilla bean. "It has to be green, Andy D. Vanilla is just boring," Maya insisted, her eyes wide with the gravity of the decision. Danielle smiled, appreciating the innocence of childhood. A very compelling argument. "Green it is." This vacation was a lifeline after 6 months of grueling federal cases involving corporate fraud and civil rights violations. She needed this. Simple joy and the warmth of the sun on her face. The source of her current freedom gleamed by the curb. A 1967 Chevrolet Corvette Stingray, a piece of American muscle that had belonged to her father. Driving it felt like a conversation with his memory. Today, it was just a car meant to make a little girl's day by taking her for ice cream. They parked under a sprawling oak tree. The peaceful atmosphere shattered. A police cruiser swung into the space behind the Corvette, blocking them in. Before the engine was even off, a young officer strode toward them, his hand resting on his duty belt, his face a mask of stern concentration. Danielle felt a familiar knot tighten in her stomach. The sickening awareness of being judged on a narrative someone else had already written for her. She placed a calming hand on Maya's shoulder. "Stay in the car for a minute, sweetie," she murmured, stepping out to confront the officer. "Is there a problem, officer?" she asked, offering a polite smile. "Ma'am," he began, his voice flat. "I need you to step away from the vehicle. It's my car. We were just about to go for a walk," Danielle replied, her smile tightening. The officer, whose name tag read Rastan, let out a short, incredulous puff of air. "Your car? A classic like this?" He gestured vaguely at the Corvette. "We've had a report of a stolen vehicle matching this description." Danielle's internal alarms blared. "A report on this car? Impossible. She had just had it serviced." The registration and insurance were in the glove compartment, her name clearly printed on them. This felt wrong, manufactured. "A report?" she echoed, keeping her tone even. "I can assure you this car isn't stolen. The registration is in the glove box. I'd be happy to show you." "Stay where you are," Rastan snapped, his hand moving to the grip of his holstered firearm. "Don't move toward the car." Maya gasped from inside. Danielle's focus shifted. This was no longer about her. It was about the little girl watching. She had to de-escalate. "Officer," she said, her voice taking on the patient tone she used with obstinate lawyers. "My name is Danielle Brooks. This is my car. My niece is in the passenger seat, and you are frightening her. Let's all take a deep breath. I can show you my license and the vehicle's papers, and we can clear this up in 2 minutes." But Rastan wasn't interested in clearing things up. He was interested in the story he had constructed in his head, a woman who didn't fit the car she was driving. His mind was closed, his judgment passed. "I'm tired of the games," he snapped, his voice rising. "I've seen this 100 times. You cruise around in a hot car, looking for an opportunity. Well, you picked the wrong park, the wrong city." The sheer, unadulterated prejudice of his words struck Danielle like a physical blow. It was raw and ugly. In her courtroom, she dealt with the consequences of this kind of thinking every day. She had just never been on the receiving end of it so directly that a cold resolve began to form beneath her shock. This wasn't just a misunderstanding anymore. It was an abuse of power. Officer Rastan had no idea who he was dealing with. "Officer," she said, her voice now dangerously quiet. "I'm going to ask you one more time to allow me to present my identification." Rastan laughed, a sharp, mocking sound. "I'll see your identification, all right. Down at the station after we've impounded this stolen car." He took a step forward, pulling a pair of handcuffs from his belt. The metallic click echoed in the quiet park. "Now, turn around and put your hands behind your back. You're under arrest for grand theft auto." The world shrank to the space between them. The sun, The oak tree, the distant laughter of children faded into a muffled backdrop. There was only the glint of steel in Rustan's hand and the suffocating weight of his baseless accusation. For a fleeting second, raw fury surged through Danielle. She could unleash the full force of her identity, state her title, and watch his smug certainty crumble. But then she saw Maya's terrified face pressed against the passenger window. In that instant, her objective shifted. This wasn't about winning an argument. It was about evidence and accountability. If she revealed herself now, Rustan would stammer and apologize. There would be a complaint filed, a mark on his record, perhaps a temporary suspension. But the root of the problem would remain. She would not be his adversary. She would be his perfect victim. "On your knees," Rustan barked, misinterpreting her silence as submission. Danielle looked at him, then at the hot asphalt. She thought of the women she'd seen in her courtroom recounting their own stories of humiliation at the hands of authority. She thought of the burden of proof, the way a victim's credibility was often shredded on the stand. Today, she would not be shredded. Today, the proof would be absolute. Slowly, deliberately, she sank to her knees. The asphalt was scorching, the sharp edges of gravel digging painfully into her skin. But she held on to the image of Maya's terrified face. This humiliation was a shield for her niece and a trap for the man standing over her. From the corner of her eye, she saw movement at the edge of the park. A man walking his dog had stopped. A young couple on a nearby bench had stood up, their phones held aloft. Good. Let them watch. Let them record. Let them become the witnesses she would have subpoenaed. "See," Rustan said, his voice dripping with condescension. "Suspect is compliant. Female, African American, approximately 5 feet 10 inches, preparing to transport." He loomed over her, a shadow of smug authority. "Should have just cooperated from the start. Would have been easier for you." Danielle remained silent, focusing on her breathing, on maintaining the facade of a defeated woman. But inside, her mind was a flurry of legal calculus. Illegal stop, no probable cause, false arrest, coercion. He was building the case against himself, brick by brick, and she was letting him. He holstered his cuffs for a moment and grabbed her purse from the hood of the Corvette. He didn't ask for permission. He dumped its contents onto the hot metal. Her wallet, a tube of lipstick, a worn paperback novel, a small tin of mints. He rummaged through the wallet, pulling out a few bills. "What's this? $20, $40, $60? Not bad for a day's work, huh?" He sneered, completely ignoring the credit cards and, most importantly, the driver's license nestled in its plastic sleeve. "Please," Danielle said, her voice carefully pitched to sound pleading. "My niece, she's alone. Can I just talk to her?" "You can make your phone call from a station," Rustan grunted, stuffing the items back in her purse and tossing it back onto the hood. He seemed to be enjoying his power, drawing out the moment. He looked over at Maya, still frozen in the car. "Don't worry about the kid. We'll call Child Protective Services. They'll find a place for her." That was it. The line, a threat against Maya, ignited a new, colder anger in Danielle. "You will not involve my niece," she said, her voice now resonating with authority. Rustan seemed taken aback by the sudden shift. "What did you say to me?" Before she could answer, a woman's voice cut through the air from the edge of the crowd. "Hey, leave her alone. She wasn't doing anything." Another voice joined in. "We're filming this. This is harassment." The invisible pressure of the watching crowd became tangible. Their phones were a jury of peers, their collective gaze a silent judgment. Danielle could feel the atmosphere changing. The power dynamic, which Rustan thought he controlled, was beginning to tilt. He had wanted an audience for his triumph, but he hadn't counted on them turning against him. He was no longer a hero cop making a tough arrest. He was a bully tormenting a woman on her knees in front of her child. "Disperse," Rustan shouted, turning to face the crowd, his voice tight with panic. "This is an official police investigation. Back up." No one moved. A burly man in a construction vest shook his head. "We have a right to be here, a right to record." Rustan's head snapped back toward Danielle, frustration seeking a target. He had wanted to assert dominance, but now he was the villain in a dozen tiny movies. His every sneer and power play was being recorded for posterity. "Ma'am," Miller said, his voice respectful. "I'm Sergeant Miller. Can you please tell me what's going on?" Before Danielle could speak, Rustan, desperate to reclaim control, took a step forward, pulling out his handcuffs again. "She's under arrest. Sarge, I'm taking her in." He reached for Danielle's arm, and that's when she decided the time for silent observation was over. "Stop," she said. The word was not loud, but it had the force of a physical barrier. Rustan froze, his hand hovering inches from her arm. Sergeant Miller's eyes narrowed. Danielle slowly, deliberately turned her gaze from Rustan to the older officer. "Your officer, Officer Rustan, has detained me without probable cause, threatened my minor niece, attempted to illegally seize and destroy my personal property, and is now attempting to commit false arrest." Miller's face paled slightly. He knew the language of lawsuits, and this woman spoke it fluently. "Before your officer compounds his rapidly accumulating legal problems," Danielle continued, "I would like you to retrieve my purse, which is currently on the hood of my car." Miller hesitated for only a second. He walked over to the Corvette, picked up Danielle's purse, and brought it to her. He didn't hand it to her, but knelt down, placing it carefully on the asphalt in front of her. With unhurried movements, she unzipped the purse and retrieved a folded document. "This is the vehicle registration for the Corvette," she said, holding it out. Miller took it, nodding grimly. The first pillar of Rustan's case had just turned to dust. Then Danielle reached back in her purse and pulled out her wallet. She flipped it open to reveal her driver's license. "This is my identification," she said, holding it up for Miller to see that he leaned in, his eyes squinting. He saw the name, Danielle M. Brooks, matching the registration. He saw the photo of the composed, professional woman staring back at him. But that wasn't what made his blood run cold. It was the other ID card tucked behind the driver's license. A dark blue card with a gold eagle embossed on it. "Judge Brooks," he said, his voice barely a whisper. Danielle didn't answer. She simply held his gaze. She saw the panic in his eyes, the crumbling of his cheap authority. "Officer Rustan," she said, and her voice was not angry. It was cold, factual, and utterly detached. "You are a disgrace to the uniform you wear and the public you are sworn to protect. You have mistaken your badge for a crown and your authority for a weapon." She turned her attention back to Rustan. "You saw a black woman in an expensive car and your mind, poisoned by prejudice, saw a crime. You refused to listen. You refused to see. And you chose to escalate and humiliate." Rustan stood frozen, his bravado evaporating. "I'm sorry," he stammered. "I was wrong." "Your apology isn't to me," Danielle replied. "Your apology should be to every black customer you've profiled, every person of color you've assumed was a criminal, every family you've humiliated because they didn't fit your image of legitimate customers." The crowd murmured in agreement, their phones still recording. The atmosphere shifted, and Rustan's power crumbled under the weight of accountability. "Sergeant Miller," Danielle said, her voice steady. "Please place Officer Rustan under arrest for unlawful detainment and abuse of power." Miller nodded, his expression grave. "Officer Rustan, you're under arrest." As Rustan was cuffed, Danielle turned to Maya, who had been watching in wide-eyed silence. "It's over now, sweetie," she whispered, wrapping her arms around her niece. The aftermath was a firestorm. The videos from the park went viral within hours. The Clearwater Police Department faced public outrage, and Rustan was fired before he even made bail. The internal investigation was swift and brutal. 6 months later, the case against Rustan moved to federal court, and by a twist of fate, it landed on Danielle's docket. She presided over the trial with the same impartiality she offered every case. And when it came time for sentencing, she looked at Rustan, a broken man. "Mr. Rustan," she began, her voice steady. "Justice is not about vengeance. It is about accountability. On July 22nd, you revealed who you are. You have mistaken your badge for a weapon. Your actions were not just a mistake. They were a violation of the trust placed in you." The courtroom was silent as she delivered the sentence. "For the charge of deprivation of rights under color of law, I sentence you to 8 years in a federal penitentiary." The gavel fell, echoing like a gunshot. A career had ended, and justice had been served that I end the quiet that followed. Danielle reflected on the weight of her decisions. She had won, but the victory felt hollow. The image of Maya's terrified face pressed against the car window was a scar that no verdict could fully heal. She thought of the countless others who faced their own officer's stance without the shield of her position. The fight was not over. It was a fight she had waged from the bench for years. And now, it was a fight she would continue to wage, ensuring that true strength is found in accountability and justice for all. What would you have done in Judge Brooks's position? Would you have revealed your identity immediately or played the long game as she did? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, because these are the conversations we need to be having.